Last week on WKRP in Cincinnati, Bailey Quarters asked Johnny Fever for a date. But Johnny forgot all about their date when his old girlfriend from California called. So Johnny borrowed Jennifer's apartment to impress his old flame. Meanwhile, Bailey waits for Johnny to show up for their date. But don't feel too sorry for her. Johnny is not having a very good time either. So stay tuned for the resolution of this mess on America's favorite radio station, WKRP in Cincinnati.
Listen up, fellow babies. We are back with Season 2 of Hold My Order, Terrible Dresser, the deep dive history nerd WKRP in Cincinnati podcast. I am the doctor, Dr. Rob McDougall, and with me is Mike Flytrap Venus Rising Grasso.
It's a better nickname than I ever could have hoped for, Rob. Thank you.
And we are back for another season of thinking way too hard about WKRP in Cincinnati, the seminal 1970s and 80s sitcom. Welcome back, Mike.
Welcome back, Rob. And it's great to be back, and we've got a great episode to kick off with, but we've also got a guest host to introduce.
A great guest host, yes. I am so thrilled to welcome one of my oldest and dearest friends. That is to say that the friendship is old. She's not particularly old, but a great friend of mine, Lenore MacAdam. Welcome to the show, Lenore.
Thank you, Rob.
Good to have you. Lenore and I have been friends for, I think, over 30 years now. And
31 now.
Yikes.
Wow.
And what percentage of that time, Lenore, would you say was spent discussing old TV shows?
Oh, no more than 80 or 85%.
Yeah, probably. That's probably about right.
I'm sure it couldn't have been much more than that.
Yeah, I've known you for almost as long as since WKRP was on the air. And so probably WKRP has been not the only dumb TV show we have obsessed about, yes, but certainly one that's been there all the way along.
It really was, and especially considering the time it was on, it's kind of interesting when you think about that, because I have actually no recollection of how we stumbled upon it in university, because so Rob and I went to university at the same time, and we're actually roommates with two other guys in fourth year, and there I believe 99.9% of the conversation was, television discussion, diving into who the Dreamcast would be, who would be the Dreamcast of the movie, about the making of the movie and the writing of the book about the making of the movie. I mean,
yes, what the montage would be of us.
What the montage would be.
The night that we decided we were going to write a book about WKRP and call it Baby If You Ever Wondered, which, is the name of this book. This is the name of this book by Michael Castle, who we got a lot of good anecdotes from.
Yes.
No, I'm not saying he stole our
He did,
title
of course.
idea.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
But I think that the night that we had the idea of writing the book, like by the time that night was over, we already weren't interested in writing the book. We were plotting out the montage of the movie about us writing the book or something like that.
The TV movie about it. Yes, we were talking about the success montage and then the.
So you said you had two other roommates. Were they Charles Kaufman and Spike Jonze? Because this is what this is sounding like right now.
Yes, exactly. We invented, a lot of people don't know that Meta was invented in Kingston, Ontario, Canada in the early 1990s by Lenore and myself. And it just sort of spread from there.
That's almost strange enough to be believable, actually.
Yeah. No, the two roommates we had as well were actually at my birthday dinner this week, and we were referencing Rob. So, I mean, we've all sort of stayed a unit despite the 20 years or so that have passed.
Oh.
I am pathetic. I am a loser.
So, what is the substance of writing?
I have failed. I am panicked.
First,
I have sold out. I am worthless.
Last,
what the fuck am I doing here? What the fuck am I doing here? Fuck. It is my weakness, my ultimate lack of conviction that brings me here. Easy answers, rules to shortcut yourself to success. And here I am, because my jaunt into the abyss brought me nothing. Well, isn't that just the risk one takes for attempting something new? I should leave here right now. I'll start over. I need to face this project head on
and God help you if you use voiceover in your work, my friends. God help you. It's flaccid, sloppy writing. Any idiot can write voiceover narration to explain the thoughts of a character. Okay, that's it. 1 hour for lunch.
So, Lenore, we've had a couple of guest hosts. We've liked to ask them how they came to WKRP. Where did they first watch it? Obviously, you and Rob talked a lot about it at college, but...
Yep.
Sorry, university. But
yes, we're Canadians, Mike.
Where did you first watch WKRP? Did you watch it in syndication, first run?
So, honestly, it's like I cannot remember a time where it wasn't part of my life, and that probably overstates it a little, but I can't. I've been for the last week or so, I've been racking my mind trying to think. I mean, even when I was younger, my parents liked the show.
Yep.
I still remember my mom laughing about the Phone Cops episode, which remains to this day my favorite episode. And, the different parts that she thought was funny versus what I thought was funny. And then we came to university. And, I mean, I'm not sure, but I do think that the love of it and it becoming such a part of my past really solidified in that fourth year, though, because we were 21-year-olds, and we watched a lot of TV, and back in that day, we watched it we would put it, let's put in the Simpsons videotape, or let's put in the WKRP videotape and watch it, right? And we would be sitting on the couch and it would keep playing and we wouldn't get up and take it all out, so we'd watch the next one, and it was an inertia thing. I mean, it was a little bit low tech, but essentially the same thing, binge watching.
Yeah.
You're not done. I want you to throw away these old calendars and TV guides.
Are you mad, woman? You never know when an old calendar might come in handy. Sure, it's not 1985 right now, but who knows what tomorrow will bring? And these TV guides, so many memories. Gomer upset Sergeant Carter. Oh, I'll never forget that episode.
Pile?
Shots I am!
Pile?
Shots I am!
Pile?
Shots I am! Shazam.
Stop remembering TV and get back to work.
So this is the start of WKRP's second season, and they come roaring out of the gate in September 1979 with a great two-parter. The episode's called For Love or Money, and in this episode, Bailey asks Johnny out on a date, but he kind of forgets and stands her up when an old flame comes to town, his old California girlfriend, Buffy. So speaking of meta...
Yeah.
No, but Buffy is actually in town in order to hit Johnny up for palimony. And after a whole lot of humorous to-do, the episode ends up with Andy and Venus and Mr. Carlson all hiding in Jennifer's kitchen and then later her bedroom as the denouement unfolds. What'd you guys think of this episode?
This is one of those episodes, Rob, I think that I didn't see a lot growing up. So when I would hear the inevitable references to this episode in many different contexts over the years from you, I would have to really rack my brain to kind of remember what the context of those quotes were. So, having these two episodes in mind, they are very, very good episodes of WKRP. I have some thoughts on Buffy the character that I think we can get to a little bit later.
Yeah.
But my feeling about the episode is that you have the characters, again, they're all really well defined at this point. Bailey has a great balance of shyness and assertiveness. You can see both of them in this episode, which I thought was kind of interesting. But there are so many great moments that everything feels real natural. This doesn't feel like a season 1 episode. It feels very much like a fully formed, advanced season episode of a sitcom.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that they just, all those things that we were noticing in season 1, the ensemble coming together, figuring out how these people work and play off one another, just seems like they nail it. What'd you think, Lenore?
So this is always one of my favorite episodes, and the best way I can put it with WKRP episodes is even my favorite episodes are generally a combination of things I really like, catchphrases I've had for years and things I'll reference, and cringeworthingly bad scenes that make me think, did they take any acting classes at all? And who wrote this? And all of them are like that. I mean, it's like anybody you love. You see the warts and all. It's any show that I've ever really loved, I've always been able to, there's a few shows like Breaking Bad that I truly think are just all great. But most of the shows I really love in that loving my pet kind of way, there's just as much I hate about it as there is that I love.
Yeah.
And probably that's the whole nerd thing, right? The more you love something, the more you can also hate it. So there are certainly some scenes, and I like this episode. There's a lot of second wave feminism in this episode that I really like, and Bailey is essentially in a lot of ways, stay with me here, a precursor to Tina Fey in 30 Rock. Now, she's not as funny, she's not as talented as an actress, but it's that same kind of woman on her own, struggling to make it work, and constantly beating up against something and trying her best.
Hey, Jack, what's up?
That woman you met this morning in my office is not a colleague of mine.
We are lovers.
Oh, that word bums me out unless it's between the words meat and pizza.
And, she's asking Johnny out. She's chosen him. She goes to Jennifer for advice. They have this amazing supportive relationship that didn't have to be like that.
No.
Bailey could have easily been envious of Jennifer, and Jennifer could have been snotty toward her, but that conversation the two of them have at the beginning where she's like, I was so cool, and I just love it, and do you think there's anything wrong with me asking a man out? And Jennifer's like, nope, not at all, you go, girl. But then when Bailey says, do you ever look at yourself and wonder if you could be better? She's like, no. But not in a judgmental way. So I just think it's so cool, and it's a relationship that could be positive in a sitcom today.
Yeah.
But I do like the episode. I think Buffy is probably one of the strongest guest stars they ever had. Yeah. And she very much steals the scene she's in. And you can absolutely see that the two of her and Howard Hessman have that history together, because when I watched it this time, I actually didn't know about that history until I looked it up, actually because of you guys and researching for this show. And I'm like, okay, that makes a lot more sense, because the two actors are so comfortable with each other physically, the way they talk with each other, the way they interact.
Yeah, absolutely. So the guest star in this episode is Julie Payne, plays Buffy, Johnny's old flame. And as we said in the first season, anytime on WKRP a guest star comes in and just runs away with their character and steals all the scenes they're in, there's a good chance that person is an old friend of Howard Hessman's from The Committee, which is a sort of legendary improv comedy troupe, San Francisco-based improv comedy troupe, kind of San Francisco's answer to Second City. And in this case, running away with it is quite literal, because this episode was not meant to be a two-parter. They wrote it as a regular episode, and it's not like often a two-parter is a big kind of event kind of an episode, and this one really isn't. If you describe the plot, it sounds like you could probably get through it in 23 minutes. But they had the script, and then Howard Hessman and Julie Payne, who are, of course, old buddies, old flames. I don't know if they're actually old flames, but old buddies. So they have that chemistry of people who know each other, and they just started riffing on it and improvising it and working on it. And they said that by Monday afternoon, they brought the writers in and said, listen to all this stuff we've come up with. And they had so much that they were like, we can make this an hour-long episode. You can kind of feel it in the episode. There's ways in which the episode is kind of drawn out. And the first half of the first act is sort of like, let's give Herb a scene and Les a scene and Jennifer a scene, because we're not going to see them again for 40 minutes, right? And so like they all get a moment, because then we're going to go. I think when I saw this as a kid, and maybe this might resonate with you, Mike, like as a teenager or kid, this might not have been one of my favorite episodes. I think that, not getting Buffy, not getting the character, you sort of resent, who's this person coming in stealing all this screen time?
That's what it is, yep.
Added to the fact that, of course, I felt bad for Bailey. So I felt bad for Bailey, and so I just resented Buffy and didn't kind of see how funny she was. But probably in part because Lenore liked this episode, later, like watching it and seeing, I don't know, just how funny she is and how funny she and Howard Hessman are together. Their performance is so physical. They're touching each other all the time. They're like in each other's face. She rubs his face and his mustache, and he's up on the couch and he's down on the couch, and he's like, they're just kind of on each other all the time. And so there is this kind of like, which just makes you feel for Bailey even more, because it's the sort of nightmare thing of the like, the person I'm interested in, and then the person from their past that they have this amazing chemistry with, right?
Yeah, I was totally going to say that about the physicality of both their performances. I mean, you can really picture them being in a black box theater in San Francisco in like 1970 with a single prop, a couch, and using that with a couple of characters just to kind of like express the hidden history behind these two characters coming together. And they kind of ooze all over each other. It's fantastic. But it's very natural. It's very naturalistic.
Upside down, your eyes look kind of Chinese.
Yeah, that's one of those ones, Lenore, that wouldn't fly today, right?
Well, except for the fact that she's entirely played for laughs, right? Like, that was one thing about it.
Yes, that's true, yes.
So this is an episode where I hated Johnny, and that's rare. Like, Johnny is my favorite, one of my, whatever. They're all my favorite characters in their own way. But Johnny's likable. You have to have a heart of stone to not like Johnny. Of course, you
love Johnny, sure.
But in this episode, I hated him. Like, it took 14 seconds for him to completely forget about Bailey's asking him out. He never, to be honest, I never bought into that relationship. I'm not a Bonnie or Jaylee shipper.
I like Jaylee better. Yeah.
Jaylee.
Okay, that's interesting.
Because he never seemed that into her. She kind of did into him, and I guess I could see that, but. And I didn't have a problem with their pairing. It's just that he never seemed that into it. But in this episode, he immediately forgot about it, despite all intentions and then all the suggestions from everyone else. Les, Jennifer, like he should have been reminded, never was. But okay, he's a big stoner.
Yeah.
Then he goes out with Buffy, and clearly he is no more into the '60s counterculture. He's just horny.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's all. That's really all it's about, right? I mean, he has some fondness for her, but
to be horribly blunt,
yeah,
he could go and see a Bogart movie with Bailey,
right.
Or he could be sure of scoring, or so he thinks.
So he thought,
with
yes.
Buffy in town for a one-night stand. So yes, it does show off Johnny's least likable characteristics, which is that he can be kind of lazy. He can be kind of, take the easy way out of things.
Yes.
And in this case, it's him taking the sure thing over the dinner and a movie.
And the way he goes and asks everyone for money, like it's like every bad characteristic about him in this episode. So the Bailey scenes are heartbreaking. I mean,
they are so heartbreaking.
Cries at the camera, and generally I don't think Jan Smithers is actually she's not. I think she's one of the weaker performers, but her, like Andy, are both in kind of tough roles, right? Surrounded by these comedy people. So I get that. But she's just, with her beautiful hair and her eyes, like looking up, and she's so sad, and it just, just wrenched my heart.
So having you here is probably good, Lenore, because you're going to prevent Mike and I from merely genuflecting to Jan Smithers' beauty for the whole episode. But am I right? Like there's a quantum change in her appearance between season 1 and season 2. I think we're going to have to retire the old what is Bailey wearing joke, because she doesn't look like a sister wife on a Mormon splinter sect anymore. Like she's stunning, and she's wearing a lot more makeup. Her hair is down. The shot of her smiling in the booth, I think, is the shot that they use in the opening credits from then on. And then just in case you could possibly have missed that she's this vision. Yep. She gets one of those take off the glasses, tousle her hair scenes, right? Where she's like looking at Herb's mirror, and like in case you haven't noticed how gorgeous she is,
check it out.
And and so all of which makes the fact that Johnny is oblivious to her, a little harder to take and a little harder to believe. Even so, although he does have this chemistry with Buffy, with Julie Payne. So
but the chemistry is, I mean, it's done in such a 70s comedy way. Like, I never really feel there's any sexual tension in those scenes. It's more it's certainly not a brother-sister relationship, but it's more, they're goofy. They're being very goofy. Like, I can't actually picture the two of them going off and having sex. There's something about the way they interact, because she's, like, clearly not present, and she's all over the place, right? And he's just, I know he takes off his shirt and all that kind of stuff, but it's all so, it's so funny that it would be, and that's okay. I mean, I don't think a show like that necessarily needs, to have it's not Mad Men, so that's fine. But I think that I get your point.
Do you think that the show lets Johnny off too easily? So both for his treatment of Bailey, but also for his treatment of Buffy?
So when you say treatment of Buffy, you mean in terms of wanting to have sex with her? Is that what you mean? Or
no, but maybe I'm jumping the gun getting into the conversation about palimony, but does he owe Buffy anything?
Oh, I see.
Or is she just a crazy person who's trying to scam him?
Yeah.
Well, I think the key here is the fact that, Chad. I mean, we don't know any Chad.
We don't know any Chad, which is, of course, we didn't even say that, but that if you had to name one line from this episode that we said on Princess Street all the time.
All the time. Yes. Yeah.
We didn't know any Chad, and Chad's my lawyer.
This is all Chad's fault.
This is boring. We don't know any Chad.
They don't know any Chad. I'll play. Gosh, Buffy, who is Chad?
Chad's my lawyer.
I think on that. So just on that line, if I can go on a tangent on that line, I asked in an email before we were planning this. Asked in an email to Lenore if she could think why this episode in particular, locked in with us, and then the postscript to the email was Lenore talking about her recent birthday party and a whole other thing, which we won't do on the air, but about this limerick and involving videotapes on a wall. And I wonder if it just like that quote, this is boring, I don't know any Chad, was super useful for us because we spent so much time in our own world of references and inside jokes and comments that the phenomenon of some people being on the outside of the joke, not knowing what the deal is with videotapes on the wall. Like, this was just really,
wow.
I think of Seinfeld and The Simpsons have given us so many sort of phrases that are just kind of useful equipment for living. This is boring, we don't know any Chad is equally a useful sort of, it's like Darmok at Tanagra kind of a thing.
It really is, yeah.
And I think that maybe that's the reason. And sometimes these things take on a life of their own, right? So we started, and I don't know if you recall this, and this was probably in an email chain like years later, 10 years later probably, where we were trying to talk about the sitcom that was the spin-off, which was basically just Chad and Buffy and them running off to Vermont together because it's real there. And I mean, like, Mike, you don't understand just how much airtime amongst us that this episode got.
You know what I would watch? I forgot that we had planned a Chad and Buffy thing, but I actually wrote down in my notes that I want a spin-off or maybe a movie where Julie Payne and Edie McClure go on like a feminist improv road trip kind of a thing,
Wow.
Well, the feminism in this episode, like the more I've recently rewatched a lot of the WKRPs just in the last few years, and the relationship again, and I mentioned this before, in any way between Bailey and Jennifer, it really jumps out at me as being really impressive. The other episode, of course, I think it comes up in the next season, is where Bailey wants to be the executive and Jennifer's coaching her, and she's really coaching her, like screw up your courage, don't cry here, go in there, do this, but in a very, very, like, that's how mentors act. And I just think it's so impressive. I find it interesting that there are two male characters in this episode that are not featured. They're only named Raoul and Chad.
Yeah.
And the Raoul thing, I mean, who the heck is Raoul? No one ever knows. And Jennifer won't tell.
How about a snack?
What have you got?
I don't know. Raoul was supposed to leave something in the oven. I'll check.
Who's Raoul?
I'll be damned if I know.
But he leaves things in your oven?
He leaves things in her oven.
And she thought when she came in, she heard something in her bedroom. She yells out, Raoul? Like, why is he in there? Like, who is Raoul?
There's an oven. There's an oven in her bedroom because, as you know, she's got the peanut butter maker, the hot dogger.
She has a lot of, and in the 1970s, the height of luxury is to have an appliance in one place that you can control from another place. We've learned that in multiple episodes last season. Is it possible that Raoul is Raoul Plaget, who is the credited author of Fish Story?
Oh my gosh! Well, if not literally, that could be a reference, definitely.
Yeah, no, that totally could be a reference.
Lady Godiva was a freedom rider. She didn't care if the whole world looked. Joan of Arc with the Lord to guide her. She was a sister who really cooked. Isadora was the first bra burner. Ain't you glad she showed up? Oh, yeah! And when the country was falling apart, Betsy Ross got it all sold up.
And then there's Maud.
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 And then there's Maud. That uncompromising, enterprising, anything but tranquilizing. Right on, Maud.
But back to this second wave of feminism piece with Bailey.
Yeah. Let's talk about it.
One thing I did is I looked up the schedule of TV shows on the air in 1979 in terms of what the other shows were, and there are a lot of shows about women.
Yeah.
And some I'd never even heard of. So there's a show called Shirley, which stars Shirley Jones and the Partridge Family, and who was in it? Rosanna Arquette and Tracy Gold from Growing Pains are both in it.
All right.
There's a show called Angie, and one of the stars in this one is Doris Roberts. You remember she was the mother on Everyone Loves Raymond?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right.
And also the receptionist on Remington Steele. But there's Alice was on.
Yeah.
One Day at a Time. This was a very feminist show for the time. There was a show called Kate Loves a Mystery, which was Mrs. Columbo.
Yeah.
And then there's then there's Laverne and Shirley, which, hey, whatever you want to think of it, it's still two single women.
Yeah.
And well, the other was Charlie's Angels, but that's different.
That's
but
different.
like Maude had just ended,
Uh-huh.
Rhoda and Mary Tyler Moore had just ended. It's like this was an era when there were a lot of and a lot of those shows. What I think is interesting is that a lot of them are this woman recently divorced and is now like a lady reporter or a lady doctor, and really they really seem to be trying it out, because as we move into the 80s, you don't see that quite as often.
You don't.
But Jennifer and Bailey, neither of them are identified and situated around a man. So Jennifer, sure, she dates and she gets all these things, but she's not, sorry to use this term, but if there's only one to use, she's not slutty, right?
No.
Like she doesn't, they don't play her that way.
No. She's absolutely in control of every single one of those interactions.
Yeah, it's actually, I mean, she's kind of like what I think of as sort of a third wave feminist sort of thing, like to sort of say that she owns her sexuality and is in control of it. And so how do you think, if you've been watching them, allowing for the fact that it was 1979, 1980, just in general, not this episode in particular, but how do you feel like WKRP does with its women characters and with feminism in general?
I think it does pretty well. And I mean, of course, my caveat always has to be to the listeners out there that I am a liberal feminist. Whether you love me or hate me, that's what I am.
Well, you use Skype for business, as we learned when we were trying to set this up. Mike and I aren't businessy enough to use Skype for business.
Anyway.
We just use Skype for academics and museum professionals, and it doesn't connect to the gold-plated Skype for business.
Yes, no, I have emoticons that move. Mine move around, and I mean that's the type of thing you get when you're at that level. But I think that it's 1979, but there are some aspects to WKRP. So it's not WKRP as a story of Bailey, but her character does evolve quite a bit over the course of the show.
Uh-huh.
So not just in terms of her appearance, but also in terms of wanting, she clearly wants something and is going after it. But what I like about her, she's not particularly good at it. She tries. She kind of represents what a lot of women go through, which is, it's hard to be a man. I want to cry at work. I want to be an executive and stop pushing me around and dealing with the herbs. And so I think in that sense, I think it's pretty good. And while Jennifer, a lot of people who don't know the show very well think, Lonnie Anderson she was a bit of a sex pot. She really wasn't played that way. She was a remarkably smart person who was always the one to get them out of the toughest binds.
Yes.
And she kind of stays static. Like, we see some sides to her, where she comes from. But then when we look at Bailey, she's a completely different character from the one who can barely open her mouth in the pilot to trying to start a union for women in broadcast or whatever. No, that was earlier on. But, she really evolves.
Yeah, she has evolved. Considering the show is really not serialized in the way a show is today. So it is frustrating that if this show happened today, then the next episode would have to deal with Johnny and Bailey's relationship and what is the status of that.
Right.
But in 1979 sitcom, they can just go back and bring it up again in season 3 sometime, and we just and what has happened in between.
Right.
We have no idea.
And they do. It's very random. They're references to Bailey and Johnny.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you guys think they slept together? The really important question. She comes in, Herb says, "How's your sex life, Bailey?"
Yeah.
And she says, "Great."
Yep. Well, I don't know, because I would think, sorry, Mike, you were trying to jump in.
No, I was going to say, well, we should not, avoid the fact that there actually was a gigantic orgy to which Les was not invited. This is very important. Not only was Les not invited, he was upset he was not
about
invited.
not being invited.
Listen, that's all I'm saying.
Well, we get some hints about this. This episode is a good one for, even though Les is very peripheral to the episode, he does get a couple of good lines, some hints that Les is maybe, as you said in the notes, maybe more with it or just up to more than...
He gets it on the outside, Rob.
I get mine on the outside.
It's weird. You keep getting these hints that there is more to Les and Les's sexuality and his dating history. In one episode, he's the guy who's never asked anybody out on a date before. The next episode, he's telling Herb it can't all be about sex, and he's upset about not being invited to an orgy. So it's just he's very enigmatic. But I want to pursue this in future episodes, Rob, as we get more of his backstory, and he gets more of these sort of. I know he's got a stalker episode coming up. Les does. He's got his computer date that ends up being a prostitute as well. So they love throwing Les into these very sexually uncomfortable situations.
Yes. Well, I always have found the sexual mores of WKRP hard to figure out, and part of it comes from just different writers. But remember, because Bailey does say, "Oh, how's your sex life? My sex life is great" at the end of this episode. But then there's an episode down the line where Johnny's apartment is being sprayed for lizards, and so he moves in with Bailey, and she's all cool about it, and the station goes nuts, like they just can't handle it, and Johnny gets offended, and he almost takes umbrage like an old school gentleman, like it. And I remember thinking that seems a bit older school, but
maybe that reflects the confusion about sexual mores in 1979. I mean, maybe there is this liminal space where the old-fashioned sort of pre-sexual revolution, represented by people like the big guy, that's fading away, but it's not quite faded away completely yet. And so you have, Herb being a serial sexual harasser. I mean, obviously if Herb existed in a workplace in 2015, he would have been out the door in the second episode, basically,
Absolutely.
So it's this weird liminal space between pre and post sexual revolution, which I think kind of explains some of the confusion.
That's a good way of putting it.
I also think it's not consistent. There are times when, when Andy, Venus seem like grown-up men, and then there are other times when they seem like 12-year-olds or 14-year-olds, and everyone's sort of giggling. Now, maybe grown-up men often seem like 14-year-olds. That could be the thing. While we're on the subject, though, of Herb, what do you guys think of Herb's big moment in part one? Where both he segues from describing a letter he wrote to Penthouse into offering this little bit of romance advice.
You take a woman to a nice place, N-I-C-E. Now that says I like you, you're important to me, and by bringing you here, you know I like nice things and that I have very high standards, and one of them is you. You joke, you kid around, and you hope that rare connection will happen when the both of you instinctively know that the same river that flows past her door flows past yours. And it's not a sexual thing, actually, but it is romantic, with all the excitement and sheer human fun that goes along with it. But the important thing is not just letting a woman know that you want her, but letting her know that she can have you in a very non-threatening, totally natural, loving way.
What else?
Yeah, what then?
Oh, now you guys know.
No, tell us.
You get her drunk, stupid.
I mean, I knew a punchline was coming, right? I mean, there was no way that could be authentic. But I tell you, it's not bad advice. It's very heartfelt. Like, make her feel special. Take her somewhere, maybe a little out of your range. These are all like great pieces of advice. Herb, we know he's a romantic. He loves Lucille, but he's just oversexed. He's just, and he wants to prove himself all the time. Maybe it's not so much libido and sex as it is Herb's crisis of confidence. Maybe he's overcompensating by his flirtation with Jennifer. Maybe it's just him wanting to be a bigger guy than he is. No pun intended. It's interesting, but yes, of course, it's ruined with that horrible punchline about getting her drunk. It's just, I mean, it's horrible. But until that point, you're like, wow, that's actually not bad advice. I would probably think that's a good way to go about going on a date.
What I think is funny about the way that scene progresses is it starts with Andy and Johnny talking about Buffy, and it's actually kind of like two young women talking, like, ooh, she was really special, huh? And we did this, and she was this. And then it sort of turns into, hopefully I'll be getting some tonight, essentially, is what they say. Then Jennifer comes in, they all look at her, she leaves, but then when Herb starts in on the whole, where you're talking about a broad, right? They act offended, like, broad. And it's hard, it's hard to tell. I don't think they're offended from a feminist perspective. It's more like, check out the square here, calling them broads. And Herb is old school, even though he's about the same age. They're all about the same age, but he certainly represents that. And so I think it's interesting watching that interplay, because it's like, it shows how when you're watching comedy 35 years removed, you don't always get every little piece of comedy.
Yeah, the context changes, absolutely. And yeah, and I mean, in some ways, maybe this episode is more feminist, or at least just smarter about men and women than, say, the last Bailey-centered episode in season 1, in that it doesn't locate all of sexism in Herb, the kind of guy that has, the flashing sign on his head that says male chauvinist, but that Johnny, the guy that we like, is thoughtless and takes her for granted.
That's good.
And also presumably took Buffy for granted. And even the guy that we think is cool and that we dig, also could do better.
Mm-hmm. That was a very good movie, wasn't it? Yes, it certainly was. Touching, but somehow not sentimental. Yes, I felt that. Oh. Would you like to go out for a drink? A drink? That would be wonderful. Oh, it would be, wouldn't it? Oh.
Bailey?
Oh.
So we mentioned this a little earlier. The episode breaks at a kind of weird spot, doesn't it? It's not really a cliffhanger. It breaks at the moment where Bailey realizes she's been stood up. And, of course, it's nighttime, so Venus is in the booth. And there is just this fantastic sort of, end of episode 1, beginning of episode 2 scene of, as you mentioned, Lenore, Bailey by herself, kind of pretending to be on a date with Johnny, soundtracked to Earth, Wind, and Fire's After the Love Is Gone.
Good stuff.
It's so, and again, when Jan Smithers is called upon to be authentic and sincere and sort of just completely emotionally bare, she's fantastic. I thought her miming the date, it's a little cheesy, but there's some real emotion behind it. And it's only helped by this song. I got, I'm going to say, I had another one of my nostalgia reveries when I was watching this episode, and that song, it took me back to being, again, the age I was when this episode came out, 4 or 5. That song was on the radio a lot that summer of 1979, and afterwards, in that sort of quiet storm, kind of, sort of yacht rocky kind of, that chorus is just burned into my brain, along with tons of other songs I'm sure we'll hear, but it had a big emotional impact on me. It was really well directed and well done.
You know what I thought of seeing the end credits come up and Bailey's looking at the window just outside the booth? Wasn't that a recurring thing on Friends, to have the episode end with there's Ross staring out the window and the sad music playing, and then they had Rachel do it, and then they had Joey and Chandler do it, and then they had the monkey do it, I think, and everything like that. But when I watched the episode, I was like, Friends stole that from WKRP, because nobody else would have ever thought of having someone stare out a window. Sadly, that's copyrighted now. But it's still that's what it made me think of.
Come on, King. Show us that trick. The one that brought me back to people I can trust and love.
Lame dog, King. Lame dog. That's right, King. This case is closed.
I was going to bring up one thing that's a bit of a tangent, but...
We love tangents.
There is a really cool little piece with Venus in the booth when Mr. Carlson comes in and asks him for essentially financial advice.
That was awesome.
And I thought that was really funny because Venus is always portrayed that way, as conservative, financially conservative, and that's the show. That's cool. I think that's cool they do that.
Right. He's always got money. Johnny's always asking him for money, and Venus is just way smarter than anybody expects.
And then when he asks him about, so I looked up online. So he said something about, should I buy a new transmitter? And he said, it depends on. Basically saying to him, you may save some taxes. Yeah. And I listened to that a few times, so I looked it up online, and there sure enough, there was an investment capital credit at that time in 1980.
You looked up the tax law.
I looked it up.
I'm so glad we have an MBA on the show.
and I'm like, it's super complicated. I was reading, and I'm like, wow. But it's called an investment tax credit. He called it a capital tax credit. But he was talking about real stuff, and that's what I thought was really cool.
Great. I love the bit Venus is a real scholar of pop culture. Have you noticed this? He had the Haystack Calhoun reference when we had the wrestling preacher on.
Right.
And he makes a reference that is just not explained at all. It's just a riff, basically. It's a King, I think this case is closed. I had to look it up. I didn't know. I knew it had to be a reference to something. It was a reference to an old TV show from the 50s, Sergeant Preston of the Yukon, about a Mountie and his faithful dogs. And it would have been something that a child, Venus, would have watched on black and white TV in the 50s. It was fantastic. Again, I'm going to keep my eye open and see if I can
Isn't that great?
Make Venus sort of my proxy as a pop culture nostalgia enthusiast of the early 80s.
Right.
For 1950s culture.
Yeah. But, it shows that, it's not that different. Them making a reference to 1950s pop culture in the 70s is the same as us making references to WKRP.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
When you watch 30 Rock or any of those shows now, and 30 years from now, they're going to be looking up, was there a movie called Face Off at one time? Because they make so many references like that. And I tried looking up, but I couldn't find anything. You know how they all Les says practically in this episode is, in Philadelphia, thousands frightened. And I thought, I'll bet that's referencing something. And I looked, I couldn't find anything.
No,
well, Les's other topical reference, though, is that he comes in, he's struggling to pronounce Ayatollah Khomeini.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is September 1979, so Les, I'm afraid to tell you that you're going to need to say that a few more times in the coming months. He doesn't know. The Khomeini's taken power, but the seizure the seizure of the embassy and the hostage crisis is like just weeks in the future when that aired.
Yeah.
That's true. That's a good point. It was just a couple months after that.
And Jennifer, it was so easy. I was so, I don't know, cool. Oh, God.
What did you do?
I asked a man for a date. Me, can you believe it?
Somebody around here?
Maybe.
That's wonderful.
Do you think so, Jennifer?
Certainly. There is absolutely no reason why a woman shouldn't ask a man out if she likes him.
Jennifer, have you seen my naked neighbor on a bobber?
I don't know.
It's just a little thing, purple and green, about that big. Drives the trout crazy.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, woe is me.
I don't know where to put this in, but I kind of love Mr. Carlson above all else. And there's no Mr. Carlson being funny in his office scene, but instead he brings it out into the lobby with his fishing rod, just the lure and the fishing rod. It's totally obvious, but both he and Lonnie Anderson in that scene do what both of them do magnificently, sort of thing. Him with the twitching fishing rod and her just sort of like gamely smiling at acknowledging the joke without acknowledging it to him, sort of thing.
And all of the lures have really filthy sounding names, which is fantastic.
I don't think that scene could have been any more cheekily written by a woman, where these two women are standing there literally talking about the progression of womankind, asking men out, while a man with a wiggling noodle is coming out asking them silly questions about nonsense, and they're both just kind of, I don't know, and he walks away. I don't see how that possibly could have been written by anyone but a nice cheeky woman.
But a woman, yeah. So this episode, most KRP episodes are credited to male writers. I think in practice there's a fair bit of sharing and stuff like that. But yeah, this episode, like the one main Bailey episode last season, this episode is written by a woman, a different woman, Mary Maguire, who I tried to find out more information on, but her only credits on IMDb are that she was a production secretary for the first season of WKRP, and then she wrote this episode, and that's all I could find out about her.
How about my seductive silver trawler?
I don't think so.
What am I gonna do?
You could give me $50.
Don't hang around out here, okay? Doesn't look good.
And TV shows still in 2015 have a hard time knowing what to do with women who are sexually active. You look at Liz Lemon from 30 Rock. One of her ongoing shticks was that she actually didn't even really like sex. And that was hilarious. Don't get me wrong. But if you look at the quote unquote funny women, it's the only one I can that comes to mind who actually seemed to have an active sex life and they were able to deal with it was Elaine on Seinfeld.
Yeah.
She's one of the few female characters that someone said once, and I think it's true, that they treated her like one of the boys and she treated all her guy friends like one of the girls, and that dynamic worked for some reason.
Do you guys know, 2 podcasts ago when we were talking about Fish Story, Mike, we were talking about wanting a list of network notes where the network's advice actually was good.
Yes.
So that was a note from the network, was that they told Jerry Seinfeld there should be a girl in this show. He should have a girlfriend or a friend who is a girl. Originally,
really?
Elaine wasn't in it, and he was, which I don't. That's like just one more piece of evidence towards Seinfeld's essential, like inhumanity to man or something like that. But
thanks again for last night.
Hey, I didn't even use one.
Yeah.
I thought you said it was imminent.
Yeah, it was, but then I just couldn't decide if he was really sponge-worthy.
Sponge-worthy?
Yeah, Jerry, I have to conserve these sponges.
But you like this guy. Isn't that what the sponges are for?
Yes. Before they went off the market. But I mean, now I've got to reevaluate my whole screening process. I can't afford to waste any of them.
You know, you're nuts with these sponges. George is getting frustrated.
You know, Mike, I've been listening to some of these previous podcasts, and both of you have been talking a lot about the Fisher King, and the big guy is the Fisher King. And I was reading up on it a little bit too, and I wondered if you thought so to take the analogy way too far, but hey, that's what we're here for.
That's what we do here.
And we have Mr. Carlson, this Fisher King, which I think is awesome. But what about, you know how there's always seems to be the myth around the person who heals the Fisher King, and that being Jennifer.
Uh-huh.
Is she Galahad? Is she Percival? Like I was trying to see. But you have much more of a background in this, and I wondered if, not to put you on the spot, but what do you think of that?
Well, we were always saying it was Johnny with his grail, you know, his cup, his coffee mug.
Right.
But now I'm thinking about Jennifer. I'm thinking about her being kind of like the most faithful knight of all.
Yeah.
And the fact that she is a woman kind of could make her one of the, you know, the celibate knights, you know, of the. I'm gonna have to look at that a little bit more, Lenore. You're gonna send me back to my Arthurian books to check that out. Interesting.
Well, you know, I did watch all 5 seasons of the BBC show Merlin, but other than that, my knowledge.
I'm sure that's accurate. That's accurate. It's the BBC.
Johnny, 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 Johnny. The vibes here are so clear.
Thank you. They are clear, aren't they?
There was a time, you know, when your aura was, you know, like brown, remember?
Yeah, well, I just got my divorce.
Yeah. But now I can sense, I can really sense, you know, that you have become more prosperous and I think slightly effeminate.
Now, whether or not you like this episode as much as I do, a lot of that's going to come down, despite all the great work that everybody else is doing, a lot of that's going to come down to how you feel about Buffy, the character of Buffy, and the portrayal by Julie Payne. Because it is true that she comes in and dominates about half an hour of this 45-minute episode is her and Howard Hessman. So either character-wise or portrayal-wise, what did you guys think of Julie Payne and Buffy Denver?
Well, portrayal-wise, I just think it's mostly amazing. You know, she has a great entrance line with, "I'm just disappointed that we even need locks." You know, that's her first line. That kind of says it all right there. And she commits. I mean, the actress just fully commits. And there's a few parts that are a little bit cartoony and whatnot, and but she just goes for it. And I really, really like the portrayal. I mean, as the character, I think I could stand a person like that for about 17 seconds if I actually had to be in the same room as her. But that's okay. Like, I don't think that it was meant to be someone that you'd like. And I don't think she was played for some sympathy. And she wasn't meant to be an evil character or someone that was a threat. But nevertheless, she was certainly played for laughs. And you don't often see women owning the screen like that, right? You know, being a goof and being a clown in a way that's not overly sexual. I mean, she's as covered in clothes as a woman can be in a show, right? I mean, my gosh, and yet there she is, just really owning it with him. So I thought the portrayal was amazing.
And think how many of those lines that Lenore that became mantras at Princess Street are her lines, right? And quite possibly Julie Payne's own lines, because this was all improv.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Nobody can do anything anymore.
What's that supposed to mean?
I put poison in the brandy.
It's very medieval of you.
Things haven't been going so well for me lately, Johnny. One thing after another.
What kind of poison was it?
If I could only get to Vermont. It's real there.
You want to hear real? My feet are cold.
Well, I'm gonna take a little bit of a different tack on this. Let me take a step back and say I love sitcoms, and I've been a fan of sitcoms my entire sort of TV watching life. I have always hated guest characters in sitcoms who come in and upset the apple cart.
Yeah.
I think it is going back to that whole thing we talked about in the wrap-up, Rob, about wanting a nice, secure family where nothing bad happens and sort of everything gets fixed in 22 minutes. That's totally fine. Buffy's sort of mission in Cincinnati to get Johnny's money, for some reason, still really bothers me. It makes me, like, I have no sympathy for Buffy, even though I find out later in the episode that, you know, she's been pressured into this by Chad and sort of isn't really the kind of person who would do this. It's not that I have no sympathy for Buffy, it's just that she's annoying, I think is what it is. And annoying not in a fun way like Herb is annoying and can be annoying in a fun way or less.
Yeah.
She just kind of rubs me the wrong way. Now, granted, there's a lot that the character gets really, like, perfectly right.
Yeah.
She is such a great casualty of the 70s. She's sort of a different breed of casualty than Johnny Fever. But she is of the same sort of ilk. She's obviously, I mean, drugs have to have been involved. She had cocaine, right? That she put into the brandy. So there has to...
So is that what you think that is?
I thought it was headache powder.
Oh, no, it's Peruvian foot powder, right? You want to put that on your feet. Definitely. But there's some, I mean, and again, all the little things like, why don't I ever listen to my psychic? You know, I've got to get to Vermont. Like, these are all really great, like...
Oh, it's done very accurately, which is one thing I really love about her is that it is, I mean, I think it's a merciless satire of the sort of post-60s flaky chick, but it's a loving, knowing one. So often, it's not like a hippie costume that you buy for Halloween. Like very often TV, like a kind of square view of hippies. You got the granny glasses and a peace sign and they're groovy and there, you got yourself a hippie, right? But so Julie Payne is from Oregon, went to university in San Francisco, and then backpacking around Europe, returns to San Francisco, age 21, 1967, the summer of love. So she is that chick. I mean, she totally lived through, like, 21 in Haight-Ashbury in 1967. Like, she knows this world, right? And so, and whether she's doing herself or doing a parody of people she knew, I don't know. But, like, this is a knowing performance. And so, like, the line I love is, like, I really got that materialism is okay. Like, that is, because it's totally done from within, that's far more devastating than anything that any sort of right-wing, parody of hippies could be.
And Rob, doesn't that perfectly preview that period in the 80s where people were starting to realize the baby boomers were materialistic? I mean, it's that perfect moment in history we've talked about, that hinge years between Carter and Reagan, and all of a sudden here's the portrayal of a 60s casualty who's beginning to realize, well, maybe I just want to have money, you know, and it becomes a thing in the 80s. I mean, it's very much sort of the hippie to yuppie progression, which I think is one that was maybe a little overestimated in reality, but definitely was a thing.
I could have made the big time, you know, I could have made a record and everything, but I gave it all up to devote myself to you.
Yeah.
I gave you my love, my body. I gave you my cosmic center.
I gave you my car.
The car's gone now.
I want to talk about palimony and you know, whether we think that Buffy deserves anything from Johnny. But before we do, I always like to, you know, shout outs to the guest stars. So Julie Payne, we said she was on the committee, and she bounced around. She did a bunch of different things. She did a lot of cartoon voice work. She did voice work on the Tracy Ullman show, which makes me wonder, like, why didn't they pick her up for The Simpsons? You know, that would have been just a whole other alternate, you know, storyline for her. You know, she's on Curb Your Enthusiasm as Larry's mother-in-law.
Oh, yeah.
And then I got to say that for about 2 minutes in 1983, there was a TV show called Wizards and Warriors, which was this basically Dungeons and Dragons kind of comedy really played totally for laughs, like totally campy. I think if this show had come out 10, 15 years later, it would have lived forever on sort of the upper reaches of cable, that kind of thing. But back in the days on the networks, you know, like I said, it lasted for about 8 minutes, but those 8 minutes were the 8 minutes when I was most into Dungeons and Dragons. And so I loved this show. They only aired 8 episodes, and they were always airing them in weird times, and so it was like this just torture that I would like, oh, I miss Wizards and Warriors, that kind of thing. And
I've never heard of this, Rob. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page now.
Oh my God! Okay, well then, in that case, I will feel justified in going off on a very stupid tangent. Okay, so Wizards and Warriors, it's this fantasy D&D kind of a world. Julie Payne played the queen, sort of this ditzy kind of a queen, but the hero, the knight, he was played by Jeff Conway from Taxi.
Yeah.
The blonde guy on Taxi. And my older sister who played in my D&D campaign, she cut out a picture of him from the TV guide as the knight and decided that was her character. That was a picture of her character, Condor the fighter, chaotic good fighter, 9th level, I think. And so she cut out a picture of him and stuck it on. We had those, those yellow, those actual official TSR D&D character sheets, Mike. So yeah, Mike knows.
I know. Yeah.
So we cut out one and stuck it on, and then Condor had an identical twin named Falcon, who was a thief, and like an evil twin. And so we cut out another picture of Jeff Conway, this time from Taxi, and stuck it on. And then anyway, because I'm a sort of pack rat with this D&D stuff, for like 20 years later, people might be looking through my gaming stuff, and every now and then there would be this weird moment where they'd be like, is the guy from Taxi one of your old D&D characters?
Oh, my God.
It's like, yeah, the whole party was from Taxi. Danny DeVito was the druid, and, Christopher Lloyd was the wizard.
Ironically, Danny DeVito didn't play the gnome. He played, the half ogre,
So that's my Wizards and Warriors story.
Oh, man.
That's awesome. Wow.
Saturday, an evil plot is hatched.
You and I can fly within the walls of Baldur's castle and simply kidnap the princess.
Can Prince Eric conquer the demons of evil Prince Blackpool and his sinister witch Bethel? It's a desperate challenge to save the kingdom by rescuing Princess Ariel from her captors on Wizards and Warriors Saturday.
So a minute ago, we mentioned Michael Castle's book, Baby If You Ever Wondered, America's favorite radio station, WKRP in Cincinnati. And it's a great book, which we use every episode, a collection of anecdotes and stories. It's written in a very earnest style, I'll say. And Castle says, under the heading, Real Issues for Real People, he says, with the realism of the station firmly established, it stood to reason that WKRP would involve itself with a number of real-world issues. In fact, the list of topics presented during the second season reads more like the index of a news magazine than a catalog of sitcom episodes. For example, the season opener for Love or Money was a 2-part episode based on the growing issue of palimony. And so, of course, I don't remember, but is palimony really an issue? Like an issue that people, or it was palimony more like the Ben Affleck nanny case or something like that? Just some sort of like titillating, goofy thing.
Well, Edith was the sweetest thing. She didn't even need a ring. We just did the natural thing that most couples do. We were lovers, we were friends. We'd be pals until the end. So I took my clothes and I moved right in. What could I lose? When I came home from work each day, she would have my supper made. Then we'd eat and then we'd play. It was all brand new. But soon I began to stray. We wasn't married anyway. I thought that I could have my cake and needed to. Now I'm paying alimony, paying through the nose. My lawyer wasn't quite as smart as the one she chose. I'm paying alimony. I thought she was my friend. If that's the way it goes, I'll never pal around again.
Yeah, so I think this was a thing. I think there was a lot of anxiety around it. The famous pop culture example of it being the sort of pioneering palimony case, which was the actor Lee Marvin and his, I don't know what you'd call them, partner, common law, whatever.
Should we explain what palimony is? I think as a kid and a teenager watching this, that went over my head, but it's when you sue somebody who you weren't married to for support after the fact. And it's just a portmanteau. Like I thought it was like a real legal term, but it's not. It's like alimony, but for a pal. It's palimony. It's like sexting or bromance or something like that. Or fun employment. It's palimony.
We didn't
It's not a thing. It's not a real thing. And it comes from this case, this delightfully named case, Marvin versus Marvin, because I think Lee Marvin's ex-girlfriend changed her name to Marvin, and her lawyer's name was Marvin. So it's actually Marvin versus Marvin gives us the term palimony.
Yeah.
Anyway, you were saying, Mike.
No, we didn't invent the really crappy portmanteau. It was thrust upon us by an earlier generation. So, yeah, the sort of palimony case that started it all was this Lee Marvin versus Michelle Triola Marvin case. And I think the way most of us know about it is from the classic point-counterpoint sketch on the Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live with Jane Curtin and Dan Aykroyd.
Yes.
Dan, times change, and so does the nature of relationships. People are reluctant to get married these days, and looking at divorce statistics, who can blame them? But the lack of a piece of paper does not necessarily mean the lack of a total commitment. A woman in this modern-day relationship may well give up all her own personal pursuits, as Michelle Marvin claims she did, to give her full support to her man's career. And Michelle Marvin is just asking that the courts recognize that reality. Dan, there's an old saying, behind every successful man, there's a woman, a loving, giving, caring woman. But you wouldn't know about that, Dan, because there's no old saying about what's behind a miserable failure.
Jane, you ignorant slut.
The Jane, you ignorant slut sketch, as it's better known. And, again, like Dan Aykroyd is doing his best sort of, straight-laced news reporter, voice during this. Very much the offended male in this entire enterprise that it says a lot more about the time than I think it was probably funnier to the audiences back then because of that whole benign violation thing, right? The whole idea of this is like marriage, but it's not. It's kind of weird. We don't exactly know how to respond to it, so we should probably have a good laugh.
Yeah, it's funny and titillating, like, oh, they slept together, they weren't married, and now the chickens are coming home to roost. I think that's the sort of joke there.
Yes.
Even though I believe, Lee Marvin won his case and didn't have to pay. And I think in almost all of these cases, the joke, probably at the time in the 70s, all the pundits are sort of pontificating, saying, well, what's the worst world come to when a dude can't shack up with some crazy old lady without having to buy her a car afterwards? But in reality, go figure, the courts often side with the rich male celebrity over the woman who slept with them outside of marriage.
Okay, so now here's an interesting case because the palimony law, or the palimony law that was passed in California, was used by Liberace's live-in boyfriend, Scott Thorson, in the early 80s. And I don't know who won that case off the top of my head, but the same law was used for a gay relationship.
Right.
And so, again, probably you're right. Thinking about how things went in the past, the law probably favored the rich celebrity as opposed to the live-in lover. So I'm pretty sure Liberace won that one, gave Scott Thorson a pittance, and sent him on his way.
The Jane Curtin, Dan Aykroyd thing, maybe this is fish in a barrel, but I understand why it was a funny moment at the time. I think that it works much better if you watch the whole sketch, and it's this long build-up. But nowadays, whenever you see a best of compilation, they just cut right to Aykroyd saying, Jane, you ignorant slut. Like, that's the joke. Like, it's so funny he called her a slut.
Well, I think even another example of the Michael Scott character on The Office not getting what the joke is, I think he actually uses that as a joke with Dwight in the complete vacuum. So there's, again, no context at all. If you listen to Jane Curtin's point versus the counterpoint, it's fucking awesome. Yeah. It's like she completely takes apart any argument he could have. I think the joke is that Dan Aykroyd and his character, his station manager character, basically is just so offended.
Right, and his back's up against the wall because he's completely been,
You make actually, it's interesting though, because you're right, when Buffy says there's nothing personal in any lawsuit, I actually think that's one of the more cartoony and not as well acted when he turns like literally to the camera and says lawsuit, like but yet he completely understands what it means. Like she could have meant anything, right? And they never do say palimony, they never do say alimony, they don't say they only say lawsuit, and he immediately goes from 1 to 11 like instantaneously. He's just like, I won't drive you back to your hotel, blah blah, I hope you die, like all this stuff. And the audience thinks it's hilarious, and I don't mean that from he's being misogynist. I mean he's just really angry. All of a sudden it's instantaneous, and there's an instant recognition as to what she's talking about that I remember when I first saw that thinking, I don't even know what sue him for what.
I think I might have thought that maybe she was pregnant, or because as a kid I would not know the difference between like palimony and like a paternity, like is palimony a paternity suit with no kids, like is that a thing?
But you're right, Lenore, it's really interesting because if you think about the Dan Aykroyd character and you think about Johnny, there it is. That like I said earlier, like that anxiety about like, I chose not to marry you. So I could avoid all of this stuff. And now it's coming back, and it's like, again, for a certain segment of the viewing audience in 1979, that must have been authentically scary to them. Again, not that I want to like sort of sympathize with the, again, folks who are in power and able to use the legal system to their advantage, but to them, the idea that they would have to take responsibility for their actions and choices, it was very, very scary. And I think that, again, that creates the humor of being, I guess, maybe able or wanting to be able to laugh at somebody like Buffy or somebody like Michelle Triola to kind of get rid of that deep set, wow, the world is changing around me, what do I do? I guess I have to laugh.
And you're right, because, I hadn't really thought of it this way before, but the show really does chew up and spit out Buffy in a lot of ways, because not only does she's played for laughs, but also she goes back to her hotel, Chad's taken off on her, left a note, that's a pretty harsh way to leave someone, really. And why did he do that?
Johnny's problem is resolved, basically it just goes away, and as they sometimes do, they back out of the conflict by having it all turn out to be Chad and not her. So so we never have to actually grapple with, does Johnny owe her anything? Was she just crazy? She gave up her singing career apparently for him. It's a nice moment when she sings Feelings in his ear.
Exactly. He gave her a car. Like, is that okay? Is that enough? And did Mr. Carlson just make a few calls to Chad on the way to the how did that happen? Right? Like, and there's no, like, why did they came to Cincinnati from LA together.
I think there's a throwaway line. Doesn't Venus say, "Oh, he checked your credit rating"? Like maybe they found out that Johnny has no money. They might have thought that Johnny was rich now.
And
in the alternate universe where Johnny doesn't say jive ass on the air in LA, I bet you Buffy finds him and takes him for everything he's got.
Maybe.
Because he's got LA like salary and he's got, LA kind of credentials at that.
I think you mean Booger.
But
no, jive ass.
When he went back the second time, he lost his job the second time by saying jive ass.
I don't remember that. Isn't that funny? That's one
listen to episode
when Johnny comes back. I thought that he whispered it. I didn't know that it was
Oh no! Oh, that's right. That's right. That's true. It's bleeped. You don't know what he says. Then how did we know that it was jive ass?
We read his lips.
That's just our guess. That's true. That's true. It's not. It's not canon.
Okay.
It's not canon. That's what we think he's saying.
That seems like a pretty big thing for me to not know.
I'm sorry. I forgot. That's our head canon. Yes.
We stacked the trivia deck against you, Lenore, with that one. We baited you into a complete trick there. Sorry.
Oh man.
So should we feel bad for Bailey, either at the end of this episode or in general, or should we feel like, no, she's got, she's happy going out with Johnny, like every couple of weeks and, and she's in control of her life and her life is what it is.
I do think Bailey lets Johnny off the hook a little bit, but this is where I like Bailey's progression because she's trying so hard to be the ace young reporter, but she also has a crush on Johnny. Like at the end of the day, she really likes him, and when he's like, "Let's go," okay, all right, sure, haha. And I think it's great that she's a real person in that way.
Well, I guess the other thing about Bailey is that I think that she's supposed to be depicted as young, right? She's like right out of school. Yeah. So, like, settling down for, again, even somebody in 1979, like, at 23 or whatever, how many years old she's supposed to be, wouldn't be really practical. So
and she could probably do better than Johnny, too, right? Don't you think?
Well, That's a good question.
He's kind of her requisite bad boy that she'll inevitably look back, like when her and her, husband are reading the New York Times on Sundays and, laughing about the cryptic crossword, she'll refer back to this stoner she dated once before she married this professor of philosophy or whatever. But I think that he is her bad boy.
Yeah.
And I think that so my heart broke for her because, everyone's been in that situation. And I do think she's kind of going to get jerked around by Johnny, but he's not a bad guy. He's not going to treat her badly. He might ignore her and might not go the way she wants, but I think the show gives her a lot of dignity because she does call him on it.
She does.
Incredibly, I felt that it would have been awkward if I'd been there listening to it, but in that scene, and then they go out. I mean, she does forgive him quickly, but she does call him on it. It's not like she lets him out completely. So I think that Bailey is the kind of character that we give her more credit by not feeling sorry for her.
Outstanding. Outstanding.
Hi, Bailey. How's your sex life?
Great.
She's kidding, right?
Oh, Herb, it's all so sordid.
Seriously, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for including me on this.
Oh, Lenore, it is so great to have you on the show and to get to talk to you, of course.
Yeah, same here. Yes. And, again, like, now I kind of understand all those little in-jokes that have been flying back and forth. Like...
You know that Chad's our lawyer.
Chad's our lawyer.
You don't have to stand in the kitchen anymore. Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back soon with more WKRP riffs and memories. If you like this well enough to listen to the whole thing, tell somebody about it.
We're online at holdmyorderterribledresser.com, which, believe it or not, wasn't taken. We're also available on iTunes, and we always appreciate your iTunes subscriptions, reviews, ratings, and downloads. So get on there and give us some stars.
Good day, and may the good news be yours.
If you've ever wondered whatever became of me, I'm living on the air in Cincinnati, WKRP. I'm at WKRP in Cincinnati.